Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
And me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
we're going to discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So, we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. Hello, welcome to Good Goodbyes. I'm Tina.
Hello, everybody. I'm Simon. Welcome to another episode. And today we're going to talk about choices. Now, that's really open, somewhat vague, but we're going to kind of go into the different types of funeral, the different venues, and how there really is no such thing as standard. What does everybody do is one of these things you hear, and there is no answer to that because everybody is different.
Yeah, that's such a great starting place, isn't it? I just want to take a moment to thank all our listeners so far because the podcast has been really well received, and Si and I are really chuffed about that because we want everybody just to have access to this knowledge. And I had a little bit of feedback, so I'm just going to give a shout out to Sarah Wyatt the Celebrant, who came back and said that the direct cremation episode she'd listened to, and lots of families found it helpful not to have traditional arrangements and to have that direct crem arrangement, whether it was with their local funeral director or another company, because it allowed them to have time to reflect and work on a very personal celebration of life, maybe with interment or scattering of ashes, something on a beach or in gardens and natural burial grounds, and allow them to try and talk through their choice. So I thought it kind of leaned in quite nicely with what Si and I wanted to talk about today, actually.
Yeah, and I think from listening back as well, I think the direct cremation episode was just more about the options that are there with it. Because absolutely the direct cremation itself does open up these other options. It does buy people time as well to do something when they're clearer of mind. It was in no way disparaging to direct cremation. It's especially when there's a plan, when there's something else to do. I think from my point of view as funeral director, my kind of comment on it being a good goodbye was those that have made that decision and then done nothing and regretted it. If there's a plan, if there's another event, if there's right, we're going to do this so that we can do something when the family can come over or whatever, absolutely, that is exactly what it should be there for.
Yeah,
I'm glad we got that feedback because it's good to clarify kind of that standpoint.
perfect. So choices, that's a great place to start around choices, isn't it? So what do people say when they first come in about knowing what they want, Si? Do people have a kind of general view? Do they know that they have choices?
I think everyone's very, very kind of tied to cremation or burial, and it's that split at the moment. Obviously, we've got things like resumation, which aquacremation, which will come in due course. Not really available widely yet. So really, yeah, burial or cremation, and then kind of dividing that down with cremation being attended or non-attended, which is kind of your starting point, and your burial being churchyard, cemetery, natural burial ground. And there is a difference between a churchyard and a cemetery, but maybe that's another conversation for another time. But yeah, it's first off split burial or cremation, and then within that, what are we going to be doing? I think for this, I wanted to point out that even within that, you can split it down again in a multitude of ways. So cremation attended doesn't have to be crematorium. It doesn't have to be church. It can be your local pub. It can be your own back garden. and then whether you go on to the crematorium or not, whether you then have a direct cremation or the other way around. All of these choices are endless, and like I said at the very start, no such thing as standard, because really you can go absolutely anywhere with either route.
Yeah. And just to give you kind of a flavour, you know, these kind of what people want tends to come from them beginning to understand that lots of different options are possible, especially with a very flexible funeral director or celebrant or minister. If you get that feeling that there's flexibility, that will help you. But also it comes from understanding what was important to the person and what they might have liked. So recently I've conducted a service on a beach. So we just went, it was very small, but we just went to the beach that person liked to walk with. A lot of people brought their dogs. We just stood for a while in a quiet circle, just talking about them and me saying some kind of words. The family then went to the cremation where the cremation happened, and then everyone gathered afterwards for more words. So the person wasn't physically present with us on the beach, but there was a photograph of them and there was a lot of conversation about them. So that was what the family wanted to do. They had something on the beach, they went off and did something private, and then they went and had something in a local pub, I think, afterwards.
Yep.
I've done something in a care home. So a person lived in a residential care home, and that was their family. I mean, they also had birth family, but there weren't many of them. So their family for the last 8 years had been all these people that they lived with. So a lot of those people found it hard to get about. So what they did was they set up their lounge and we had a service there.
That's great, because you're absolutely right. That becomes fact. If you're living with people for years and years, and I say it a lot, especially the care home staff, they're spending 40 hours a week with this person. I mean, probably a lot more than the family are.
Yeah.
They're absolutely going to build relationships and bonds. So yeah, to do something in a care home is fantastic, because they're probably the least mobile. Trying to uproot the entire residents and move them onto the crematorium is unfeasible. So to do something there.
And the family did such a sweet thing at that. So we had this formal service with all the words you would expect, and her life story and some poems and things and pieces of music. And then everyone immediately went to the back of the room and had tea and cake. And she had enjoyed collecting quiche jewelry. Like, she had this massive trinket box full of inexpensive jewelry that she called quiche. So sort of things that was like tortoises on a brooch and kind of unusual things. And the family went around the room with this and said, would anyone like to choose anything of hers to remember her by? And people were having such a giggle, saying like, oh my God, here's this enormous cat necklace that she used to wear, and oh look, here's this kind of tortoise brooch. And people were choosing things and chatting about her and her unusual style, and it was just so lovely, and much more possible because of the environment that everything happened in.
I thought you genuinely meant quiche as in little egg flan jewelry. That was very confusing for me for a moment there.
Well, that could be a brand new thing completely. Eatable jewelry.
That is a niche market, absolutely.
A niche quiche market.
Quiche, my word. So yeah, there's so many things, and religion obviously will take a part of it. So obviously whether we're going into church first or not, what that church looks like. Some churches do things in completely different ways and like to look after the service in their entirety, and that's going to be, we're going to be led by that, and that it's not, there is no such thing as standard, and that has to be a conversation, because I've got a family that are having a burial, but they want to go somewhere first to have a service, and then they want to go back there and have the wake. And trying to make that work, because actually the environment that the service is in and the environment the wake is in can sometimes be two different environments, whereas they're trying to make that one and the same. So it's playing with the idea of village halls or community centres, which again we can get outside caterers in. We can make a blank square room a service chapel with the seats set up, and then we off to the burial ground. A few tables are moved around, and a buffet table comes in, and all of a sudden it's a wake venue.
Yeah.
So yeah, anything is possible. Really, really is, and that's not an oversell from a funeral director. That is a genuinely, if you want it, we'll make it happen, because it has to be right for you. Like the beach, it wouldn't have been right for them all to sit in the crematorium chapel. Like, clearly wasn't that sort of person, wasn't that sort of family.
And I went to a family friend's funeral recently myself, and it was a Catholic funeral, and they were of great faith all their life. She was in the church the night before, I think, received in the church, and then the day of the service, she was present when we arrived, and then left that service and went for a burial more privately with the family, and then we all met at the wake. So some people would be very guided by their faith and what is usual. Other people, completely different mindset about it all, and a different kind of way of understanding what they want, really. So ministers can guide you if the person has some ideas around their faith needs, but equally, if you want celebrations of lives and funerals which are from either humanist celebrants or celebrants and other informal ministers, then most of us will go to a variety of settings for you and are very flexible about that. So as we've said in an earlier episode, Si, we've been on a boat and done things for somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And the boat is one of those things that, especially where we are in the world, water's a huge part of our life down here. And there are places, I'm sure, around the country and around the world of immense significance that aren't a church, that aren't a chapel. So use them. That's absolutely what they're there for.
Yeah.
And make it personal, make it right for the person you're celebrating. I really think that's so important, so important.
Yeah. So if there's a question in your mind about something that you wonder if it's possible, particularly the shape of the service, the venue, the format, then don't hesitate to just ask some questions about, this is what we were thinking about and what might be possible, because people like Si and myself will have those previous experiences and we'll be able to guide you to what you might be able to do.
Yeah, exactly that. And as with everything, the conversation is really important. And I think one of the episodes coming up, we're going to talk a lot with Tina about that big first conversation that you have. And you have one of them with the funeral director, you have one of them with the person taking the service, and you have to trust both of those people. And we'll be listening to help guide you through and probably tell you things you didn't know you could do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, don't come in with the view of what's standard, what are we going to do because everyone does it, because there is no such thing.
Yeah. And certainly crematoria, even within that traditional idea of going to a crematorium, the staff there tend to be so helpful, and they can certainly facilitate things to happen within crematorium that you think you might not be allowed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. I hadn't even thought of, even within the traditional setting, it might be you can do something different. So I had, actually at a crematorium recently, we had trestles in front of the catafalque, and chairs. We'd moved the sort of prayer book stands, moved the chairs into a semicircle. That chapel time is your own. So yeah, even that I hadn't even thought. Even within the traditional setting, you can do something that maybe not traditional, maybe not what you expect. So yeah, flexibility there as well. Good point.
Yeah, no, that's true. Absolutely true. Yeah. So yeah, so just ask, and a lot of choices possible, I think, is the flavour of this episode, really. So did you want to say anything else before we sign off for everybody?
Just ask us. Send a text message. There's a link in the show notes. Get on the social medias. I mean, I'm a 40-year-old funeral director, but I've got a TikTok. Come and ask. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, wherever. Drop us a comment. This is on YouTube as well, so you can comment under YouTube videos. Ask the questions, because it's really good for us to be able to answer them directly, rather than just trying to come up with ideas that you might want to hear about. Let's actually give you what you want. But thanks for joining us in this episode, and I hope you come back for the next one. And we will hear from you soon, hopefully, as well.
Perfect. You've been listening to Good Goodbyes, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment and share. Drop any questions on our social media, on Instagram, or in the text option in the show notes.
Si and I are qualified professionals, but we always advise our clients to seek any additional support from medical practitioners if they need to. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay well and be kind to one another.